Hey everyone, Anark here, and this is another installment of Anark Abridged, where I just sit down and talk to the camera for 20 to 30 minutes on some topic I have in mind. And the topic of today's video is going to be, what can you do? The title of the video is kind of, tongue-in-cheek insofar as that it's what is to be done. But what I'm hoping to do here today is just kind of have a short discussion about what the sorts of actions are that people can carry out within their circumstances in order to actually bring about transformation in the world. So I don't want you to think that this is like an exhaustive list of things you can do, but what I'm hoping to do is give you some kind of brief understanding of the sorts of actions that might be transformative for us to carry out. And then perhaps you can find the answer to the question yourself within the list of things that I lay out here. If you would like to know the overall, just the strategy that we are supposed to be carrying out, I've actually produced numerous videos on the topic. If you wanted to watch one of my video essays, you could go watch Constructing the Revolution. But I've also produced an Anark Abridged on the topic, which is basically just like, what is prefiguration and why horizontalism is the only method that is available to us to actually carry out revolution. And if you want to know what I mean by revolution, then you can go watch the Anark Abridged that I've done on the topic, which is about reform versus revolution. Maybe that video might interest you. So what I want to say is that this video is more kind of a mixture of the strategy and the tactics, because, I get messages from people like all the time asking me, what can I do in my circumstance? And the first question I always have to ask them is, well, what is your circumstance? Right? Like that's the real the real question at hand here. But I think a lot of people sort of stop at that point and they're just like, well, it's going to be different based on your context. That's not what I'm trying to do here today. What I am hoping to do is kind of give you an overview. So first, let me say context absolutely does matter. And it matters for a variety of reasons. One is that we are all situated differently within the society that we live in, right? We all have different opportunities to intervene on different kinds of systems that we are part of. For example, if you're a student, then you are uniquely oriented within the school system in order to carry out some sort of transformative action within the school system. But those who are not students don't have those same opportunities to intervene in the way that you do, right? People, for example, take the workplace, something that is pretty universal. People generally consider that, we all have to have jobs and so on, but that's not even necessarily true. There are people who don't have jobs and don't have that means of intervention in the system. So those things absolutely do matter. So the first question I want you to take in mind is, what sorts of hierarchical systems are you embedded in? What are the oppressions that you and the community that you are within actually face? Because I think that's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. You actually have to find those oppressive modes within your existence which dominate your existence. And if you really want to build power in a longer term sense, you need to also inspect how the systems that you are embedded within affect a large group of people, including other people. So you need to be asking, what struggles am I part of that other people suffer from? What unique struggles do I have? And who else is also experiencing those unique struggles? After you've asked that question, the next thing you need to ask yourself is, what are your means for intervening on those oppressive systems? So Obviously, the answer in a general sense is going to involve collective action. But there are things sometimes that people can do individually. You can, for example, just provide your services and skills as a person to others. But even that's kind of a form of collective action. So let's kind of talk about some of the variety of structures we might want to create. And let's kind of start broadly. First of all, let it be said, the only sorts of structures that are going to have any effect in really changing the world are horizontal structures. Structures wherein you are striving for equality of structural power and distribution of shared powers, delegation of those powers as needed. If you want to know more, about those sorts of structures and how those can all be carried out, you might want to go, once again, watch Constructing the Revolution. Right now, I'm talking about what might be called councils. So you should be trying to create council structures, which can be thought of as sort of like horizontal structures for making decisions together with other people within the the systems of oppression that you are embedded within. So I'm using this in kind of a loose way because what I want to get across to you is that at base, that is the question you should be asking. Not that is there one kind of horizontal structure that you absolutely must make in order to succeed, but that you should try to make the horizontal structures that are available to you so that you can intervene to prevent oppressive systems from oppressing you. So I know I've stayed very abstract, but I'm trying to go from abstraction to specifics as we go. So what is an example of a classic mechanism for collective action which involved trying to horizontalize power? The union, right? The union was a very prolific method for horizontalizing the power of the workers, giving the workers power back, and it allowed them to intervene within their workplace in order to organize the power of the workers and stop themselves from facing such prolific oppression within the workplace. And then if it scaled up and you had many unions or you had many people that were taking place in collective action, it could then intervene on the economy as a whole or sectors of the economy at first, and then, larger and larger chunks of the economy as those unions are organized together and their capability to strike grows larger, for example. But the reason why I started in this broad sense is because the union's really, it's not the only body of conflict that we have available to us. Councils are bodies of conflict in almost every single form that they embody. Take, for example, that you are, trying to decide how to organize the workflow of many graduate students. And instead of going to the administration to figure out what the answers are, you get all of the graduate students together, and the graduate students not only collectively bargain together, but make decisions about how to do their work together. And in doing so, you have created a body which can act as an intermediary between those graduate students and the school or the faculty more broadly. But once again, these are just kind of I'm giving examples off the top of my head, but the examples go on and on and on into different contexts. So you could also, if it's needed within your context, create organizations that function through these sorts of the horizontal decision-making methods. And in fact, you should. So I suppose that leads us to the next point. Yes, we should be creating those councils that operate at the point of struggle within oppressive systems in order to liberate people within those oppressive systems and to give them power to not only bargain, but in order to exert power over their oppressors together. But we need to be creating broadly just political organizations. So that is to say, in every single locality, there needs to be at least one organization, and preferably more than one, and depending on your situation, organization that is committed itself to spreading a one or another libertarian, socialist, horizontalist, or anarchist ideology. So it should be seeking to spread popular education and It should also be trying to expand the number of anarchists who are working together, who are coordinating together, and who are creating more of these types of councils that we've just discussed. Sometimes this is called a catalyst group, but for example, Farge might call this the specifically anarchist organization. But I want to be a little more broad here. There just needs to be organizations whose duty it is to carry out mass radicalization, to get radicals and militant organizers together in one place to organize together within the context, and to really more broadly just kind of act as catalysts to produce more of those horizontal structures. So kind of as we get here, it comes to mind that many of you may think that what I'm saying is try to construct all of these. Well, that's not really within your power in a general sense. I mean, if it is, go for it. That's great. But it usually is not going to be within your power to create all these sorts of different structures that I might lay out here. Instead, what you should ask yourself is, what are you already capable of doing? What kinds of things are you good at doing? And what can you provide within the process? Because you might find, for example, that in your context, people are already working on one or another of these things. You don't need to start something new if that's the case. Go try to help people that are already doing the work. Step number one might just be within your locality, finding people who are already addressing some system of oppression and then going and aiding them in fighting against that system of oppression and giving your skills to that structure. However, you might find that there is no presence of any such project within your locality, in which case your responsibility is simply to, start the very first parts of the process. And might I add, in a very general sense, if there is no other project, no other horizontal or libertarian socialist or anarchist project in a general sense in your area, then you should probably start with an entity whose work it is to educate people and to reach out to normal people within your community. The go to the people philosophy, as it's sometimes called. But I want to emphasize that, the catalyst group should start by trying to create a radical consciousness, to expand that radical consciousness, to create more people with that ideological orientation, and then to, educate, agitate, and organize, as they say, right? You start by educating them, then you agitate them towards action, and then you organize together with them. So this, you almost have to do this in order, right? You have to start by educating people. People are not even going to recognize what they do, it's going to be hard for people to reclaim their fundamental dignity when they don't even understand the system that they're embedded within. They know they're miserable, but they don't really know why everything is the way it is or how it could possibly be changed. So step number one is often going to be educating people, as well as perhaps getting rid of some of the stigmas around words like anarchism or socialism or communism, depending upon your context. So what that might mean is if there is nothing in your area, if there are no radicals in your area, step number one might be just trying to do the basics of, popular education. And that would probably be things like reading groups or printing a bunch of zines and then setting up a table at public events and talking to people about anarchism and just having conversations and handing out literature to them. And when I say this, I understand that there might be some responses because everybody, once again, is in different contexts, that this would be dangerous within your locality. One thing I want to say is I'm not going to tell you that's not true. There are almost certainly places upon this planet where that would be deadly dangerous. In fact, somebody might kill you if you did that, in which case, obviously, I am not telling you to put yourself in that sort of physical danger just to try to educate people. But I think that a lot of people might overestimate that danger within their community if they live in a community that has a very homogenous sort of conservative mentality. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Tulsa, Oklahoma, obviously, if you live in the United States, you're familiar with the fact that this is a very red or Republican state. But I want to convey to people maybe who aren't familiar with the United States context, Oklahoma is a very, very conservative state. Yet we do this out in public. we go and we table with literature and we talk to random people about anarchism. And you're right to think that there are some people who give us some dirty looks and people who come up wanting to troll, but we have never had a physical altercation. Don't get me wrong. There's been once or twice where it has gotten close to that. But we've practiced de-escalation, and we're open to talk with people even who have very, very differing opinions to ours. So what I want to say is if you're in a context where everybody's very conservative, you're going to need to practice like a little more patience. Okay. Because people are simply not going to be where you're at. You're going to be presenting very radical ideas to them. So that means that you're going to need to practice patience with them and to earnestly be trying to educate them, not to win an argument, and to give them, education that is pertinent to their experience and which will help them understand their own experience, help them understand how they are oppressed by the system rather than trying to entrench yourself in a war. And don't get me wrong, I just want to say there are many contexts where this is in fact too dangerous to do, and I'm not encouraging you to go get violently assaulted somewhere in public just to carry this out. But I think many of you should consider that this is step number one to radicalizing, especially small and insular communities. And from there, you can do things like start reading groups where you all get together and read short essays or read short books, introductory pamphlets, and so on, and then have discussions with those people and radicalize together with those people. If you think of this whole process as being about, tending a garden rather than carrying out an immediate series of actions, I think you'll probably have a much better understanding of how to approach a bunch of different circumstances. Think about like the example I gave where there's no horizontal organizations and where there's a very conservative, ideology behind everything. That might be considered like, we haven't even planted the seeds. The soil is infertile and it has to be remediated first and tilled before we can even plant the seeds, right? But thinking into the future, that's just the first step. That's just the first thing you've got to do. Yes, it will be painful. Yes, it will be hard, but we need to think in a long-term sense. Okay. So, remediate the soil. Till the soil, remediate it with new nutrients, germinate the seeds, plant the seeds, tend them to fruition. Go through this process as it is available to you. And might I add, if there is some horizontal ideology or tendency which is very popular in your area, don't feel like you are obligated to defend some label that is absolutely antithetical to your context. You don't need to call yourself an anarchist. You don't need to call yourself a socialist or communist. If it's all it's going to do is confuse people in your circumstance, and there's already some horizontalist, sort of tendency, just, go with that tendency. For example, there's a lot of places where there's some kind of like indigenous culture that is still very present and has a very, horizontal thrust to it. Take, the Zapatistas in Mexico. Obviously, you don't need to, fight a war over the word anarchism. The horizontal method is being carried out. You don't need to place yourself in opposition to that. Consider yourself an accomplice to that, and do your very best to assist that orientation which already exists, and try to tend it to fruition and be part of that process. But I think you're going to find that in many occasions where there is no horizontal organization, there's probably also not one of these sorts of horizontal cultures already present. If there is, utilize it and try to spread it and try to ally with the people who are still aligned with that horizontal culture. But if there is not, you're probably going to have to start from scratch. And if you do have to start from scratch and you don't fear being murdered in the street, then I actually do recommend fighting for the term anarchism. Because what it's going to do is it's going to connect people to a history of horizontal struggle. It's going to give them a touchstone for what horizontalism means within their context, because they don't have a cultural precursor available. So you need to connect their understanding of anarchism with what it actually is. So, what you're going to find is that in many places where that sort of like, conservative culture pervades, or I guess I'll qualify this a little bit. In some places, there is a more, ANCAP or libertarian, free market capitalist mindset. And in other places, you're going to find that it's more kind of like avowedly authoritarian and fascist and pro-state, using the state to suppress their enemies. In the latter, I don't know how much success you're going to have. I think that's probably a very dangerous area in a general sense, and it's going to be really hard to get those people on your side. But if you're in the more former category, it's going to be easier to get them to stop agreeing with capitalism if they really do have this "don't tread on me" mindset. If that's real, and that's not just a cover, which I'm sad to say quite often is, if that's not just a cover, then those people can be made to understand why capitalism is an oppressive force in their life as well. And that might be quite valuable for you to associate or get them comfortable with what anarchism actually is and how it is the liberatory ideology which fulfills their desires for freedom and autonomy and dignity and not, in fact, capitalist exploitation. You're going to find, of course, in many of these circumstances that people are going to hold all kinds of bigoted viewpoints. And that's also going to be a struggle that will hamper solidarity. But what I want you to understand is that this really is the first step of the process. Education. People really do have to understand a new way of looking at the world. They need to understand how the world is currently oppressing them. They need to understand that there are alternatives. And then they need to be given a way that they can actually carry out that alternative like memetically or algorithmically, you might say. And that has to spread. Okay, you spread it to one person and they spread it to another person and they spread it to another person and so on. And before you know it, you were responsible for radicalizing 20 people. This process can and does take place, and we need to be patient and willing to carry out very difficult conversations in order to make it take place. But obviously, that is not where a lot of people are. A lot of people live in contexts where there is already a horizontal organization, wherein there are already horizontal projects that are taking place, in which case the goals are going to get more specific and they're going to become more organizational, more methodological in their approach. That is to say, after you've already catalyzed this radical consciousness, or say the one that exists, after there are already sort of these horizontal projects being created, the idea should be then to give solidity and organizational form to as much of this as possible. And then, as this is done, to join these together into a unified power structure. And I want to be clear, I do not mean absorb all of them into an organization. In fact, you will find that is a net negative. Instead, what you should be looking to do is find a way to federate or confederate them in where they can cooperate under a new structure while maintaining their organizational existence. And this should be seen as an extremely high good in that process. Getting these groups to join together into federations and to cooperate together to do things and to have a shared platform in that process is extremely important, because that builds our power up another layer. We've already got organizations. Now we've got organizations of organizations, which means coordination at the organizational level. Okay? This is also going to be the era where you need to build strong organizations, and those organizations need to be trying to set out strategic goals that lead them into the next phase. Okay? And I want to emphasize that where I'm at right now in this process of discussion is where a lot of people are. I think a lot of people live in a kind of mixed context where there are some examples of like things that have like a horizontal thrust to them, and there may be just a few or there may be many, but they are generally, and from my observation in a broader context, and I think you'll agree if you're out there, they're not really working together in a broader context. They're not coordinating in a formal sense. And a lot of the time, they are not very formally coordinated internally. But this is at that stage of the process, we should be trying to build consistent structures to to expand that power to more and more people. And as we said earlier, to continue to go to the people, continue popular education, continue trying to spread radicalization to more people, not for the purpose of recruiting. That is it's a byproduct of doing it, but instead to create more and more people who will act in accordance with a horizontal revolutionary method. That's the important part. They may form their own organizations, or they may simply show up one day when what you need is some particular skill or thing. But the important part is about spreading that community, that solidaric community of radicals who understand a new transformative vision. So there's obviously a lot I could say, but the one that I want to leave on, okay, is that the most convincing thing for people is demonstration of success, showing them that something works, giving them a viable model which they can follow and emulate. That's one of the most important things that you could do for the movement in any context, okay, is to create something that is stable, successful, and self-perpetuating, that lasts. And if you can do that, you will start to find that you're doing more than a lot of other people, because even though there are groups that might pop up and do something for a little while and be great, they fizzle out in a year or 2 years as they burn out. But the ones who create something that is stable, that demonstrates success, and is organized and coordinated well, those people stick around and they get things done and they demonstrate the effectiveness of the method. So what I want to emphasize here is your job is not to go around infighting and, trying to split yourself into smaller and smaller groups that all hate each other and getting, that's a waste of time. Don't ally with people who are not your allies, but don't fight with people who just disagree with you. Even if you can't cooperate with them, there's no reason for you to go around fighting with people. Unnecessary. Much better if you want to actually spread your position, if you want to actually spread the adoption of your ideological perspective, is to simply get out there and build something that people want to emulate. Okay? And I think this is what a lot of people don't understand. They keep looking for some magic bullet that's going to just fix all the problems. Oh, you just build this kind of structure and boom, problem solved. You're done. You got it. And I'm telling you that no, we need people out there experimenting and building these structures on the ground where they matter, and thinking outside of the box and thinking about their circumstances and trying to understand what it looks like to succeed within that circumstance. Because, while I can give you a lot of guidance, and I of course plan to continue giving people guidance on how to act in the world, people that are on the ground are going to have unique understandings of their context, which no theorist, myself included, could possibly include all of those little details, nor could I create a list of every possible thing that might work. All I can tell you is from my theoretical understanding and from the evidence of history, which you can see my reasoning in other videos, those methods just have to be horizontal and have to be about equalizing the distribution of power and creating power for the masses, not a small group of people. They have to resist gatekeeping, they have to be restorative and transformative, and they have to be able to spread themselves. They have to be able to self-perpetuate and spread to others and to gain a larger appeal. Other than that, we need people who are willing to experiment and build new things, recognizing what oppression that they face within their circumstances, and recognizing that there are things that can be done to change those circumstances. So hopefully some of that hit home. Maybe that'll apply to you in your circumstance. I don't know. I know it was a bit of a ramble, but I hope that made sense to you, because I think those actually are a lot of the basics. I think that that's kind of an overview of some of the more general things that you need to think about. But for today, that's all I'm going to talk about. I will see you next week. But for now, might I remind you to like this video, to comment below if you agree or disagree, but moreover, if you have more advice for people that want to act. Really, please turn these comments into a place where people can be given the resources to act, and ask questions if you want to know how to act. And please, those of you who have organizing experience and who have read the theory, go respond to those, right? I can't do it all myself. Go respond. Talk to other people in the comments and give them your real life experience and give them resources that they can use in order to act within their circumstance. If you like this video, I do these Anark Abridged videos every single week. So go subscribe to the channel and you'll see these on every Friday. Lastly, if you really like the work I'm doing here, you should go become a patron at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Anark, ANARK. And becoming a patron at any amount is enormously helpful to me. So I think that's it. I think that's the spiel, everybody. And I am done for this video. I will see you next week.